It was a much shorter way than I was anticipating, but at least we're getting somewhere this time. Bienvenidos, worldwide fans of the planet's hottest entertainment with an edge from a galaxy far, far away. Jaime En Fuego here, and once more, Enfuegotainment, my namesake program, talking about none other than, that's right, the Mandalorian, Season 2, and technically Chapter 11, which is entitled The Heiress, and this is a quick rapido review, my thoughts on this episode, and as I just said at the beginning of this before the In Flames cranked in, yeah. This is a very short episode. Perhaps we were spoiled by that first one at the beginning of Season 2 that Jon Favreau directed, The Marshal with Timothy Olyphant, because that episode was like 54 minutes. Now, granted, there is a lot with, previously on The Mandalorian, and then those awesome paintings that we get in the credits at the end of every episode, but they take up a large chunk of time, and this episode, if you take away that, bumper at the beginning and at the end, we are talking like, I think less than 28 minutes. So I could not believe how short this one was, but thank goodness we got back to some exciting storytelling and also great directing. Bryce Dallas Howard returning. She did the episode in the previous season that was kind of like Seven Samurai sort of thing, and protecting the town from the marauders, blah 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 blah. That was not one of my favorite episodes. It's definitely in the lower half of just the entire series in general. But I mean, with the fact that the previous week's episode where Mando is escaping, the New Republic peeps, their X-Wing flyers, kind of giving him some shite, and trying to get away from all of those spiders on the ice planet and stuff like that. And just the goofiness of the storytelling, this hungry little hippo here, and the fact that I took major qualms with what he was chowing down on in the previous episode, and so much so various other people did as well, that a rep from Lucasfilm actually took to Twitter to defend the storytelling choice of him eating children. But yeah, nonetheless, there was nowhere they could go but up after the previous week, which I thought was possibly the worst episode in the show. That's not to say that it didn't have like some amusing beats and merits here and there or whatever, but yeah, I really, really did not like it. And thank goodness we get back from the just kind of quest of the week sort of thing to the main narrative, which is where we return for this episode. And, Favreau script's a great show, and I think that's why Bryce had she was able to show her directing prowess, I think, a lot more so in this, with a more compelling tale to tell, and she does. It's very well directed, and yeah, so basically, as far as getting you up to speed, the Mando is finally arriving at this like kind of water planet, this like port, where finally Frog Lady can get reunited with her hubs, and they can fertilize and, just replenish their race and so on and so forth, which is cool. But the purpose of him actually taking this gig in the first place was because there were allegedly other Mandalorians on this planet. And so he is directed to a little pub where he can get a little hungry homie here some chowder and attempt to gain some information about where said of his own kind could possibly reside on this planet. We see a mysterious hooded figure at one particular point. That's what you will see in the thumbnail when you click on this episode on Disney Plus. So we get, a brief glimpse of her early in the episode, and then Mando basically sets off on his quest with one of those guys with like the tentacles on his face, like the Squidbilly, there's squid whatever sort of thing going down, and yeah, he's basically en route to locate some of his homies and whatnot. And that's really about as far as I can go without spoiling stuff, this being a non-spoiler review. But I will at least say that thankfully this gets back to the main narrative as I specified. And if you remember dude from Breaking Bad who played Moff Gideon, who is at the end of the previous season, he's wielding the Darksaber and all of that. Thankfully, we kind of get back to at least a little bit of information about that, because Mando does meet up with some Mandalorians, and that's where, if you're familiar with Clone Wars or Rebels, they had cast Katie Sackhoff, who everybody loves from Battlestar Galactica, that revival of it from a number of years ago, that was very well celebrated and stuff. She voiced a character on both Clone Wars and Rebels, and then she was in turn cast, without specifying who, for this season. So I could imagine a lot of people who haven't watched either of those animated shows, they might be a little bit confused. I binged the hell out of Clone Wars earlier this year, and I just started Rebels. I watched the entire first season, and I dug it, but a lot of characters that, from what I understand, were in Clone Wars that show up in Star Wars Rebels, because, you know, Dave Filoni, who is behind The Mandalorian along with Jon Favreau, he was the one behind both Rebels and Clone Wars along with Lucas's assistants and stuff. And so, yeah, man, there is a character that a lot of people who are in the know are going to geek out about, and I mean, if you're familiar, you're like, okay, could it be Sabine? Could it be Bo-Katan? There's lots of, you know, possibilities in that regard, but if you know who Sackhoff was, you might, you'll probably be able to put two and two together, which is pretty cool, and it's pretty goddamn cool, man, I gotta say. There is an Imperial presence on this planet, and it's like certain weapons are being sold off here, and that's about as far as I can go, but there's some great action in this, and thankfully not of the CGI, you know, big creature variety, although that's not to say that there isn't at least a cool creature appearance at one particular point. Favreau kind of seems to, every week now, whether it's the Crate Dragon in Chapter 9, or whether it's the, you know, crazy alien ice spider stuff going down in the previous episode, he at least has a cool little spotlight, at least on the weekly at this particular point. But I was just happy to have some actual, like, person-to-person action going on, and with Imperials, you know, there is a re-emergence of some stormtroopers in this episode, but the action, I mean, Bryce does a great job directing it. Really, the only gripe that I have about this episode is the fact that it was so friggin' short, and yeah, I mean, you've got a little bit of cuteness for Dude here, but once again, similar to the Marshal, he takes a back seat, and the narrative does not necessarily focus on him to the highest regard. He's just kind of in the background hanging out, which is fine. I mean, he's got his cute little beat here and there where, you know, Mando's like, don't play with your food, and, you know, the chowder, there's something alive in the chowder and it jumps on his face, and that's cute. There's also a stowaway on their ship at one particular point that just barely gets back into the atmosphere and has to be repaired. And he's always fixing his damn ship, man. I mean, it's a running joke, obviously. But, so yeah, little Yoda has some stuff to do in this episode, but he's not like a crux of a major sort of stuff. They are thankfully going back to just advancing and answering a few of the questions that we had, and especially those who have watched Rebels and the Clone Wars have, you know, after a big reveal at the end of the first season. And so that's going to be about the end of all that I can say today. Short run time, but everything else was damn good. And we also, at the end of this episode, we're pointed to the emergence of a character that we know has been cast for this season. We just didn't know when they were going to show up, and that is where it's a specific Jedi, because, you know, we're trying to get a little guy back to you know, his own people, and there's a name drop at the end of this episode, and you're just like, oh, sucker, got me very excited, and I'm just pumped to see where the narrative goes from here. So that's the end of the proceedings, everybody. I don't typically rate these, but this was definitely 4 out of 5 Fuego Fireballs. This was a Fuego episode of The Mandalorian, and despite the length, I was supremely captivated. So I have been the aforementioned Jaime En Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where a like, a share, and if you are inclined to subscribe, means a hell of a lot. It's been primarily TV this past week. I did a review of the FX, by the way of Hulu, episode of A Teacher, which is a reimagining of the 2013 film of the same name. Stars Kate Mara as a teacher who is kind of getting involved with her underage high school student, and so that was rather compelling. I reviewed the first 3 episodes of that, as well as AMC's first season of Soulmates. But if you're down with the galaxy far, far away, there's tons of stuff that I've covered on there. You know, from, you know, books to, you know, all of the films, and you know, so on and so forth. So check that out if you're inclined. But if you like spectacular stuff, youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. That's my bigger YouTube channel I'm affiliated with, where we do at least 1 episode every single day, whether it's a review of television, film, comics, novels, video games. I have a weekly Stephen King show every Saturday, and yeah, it's a ton of fun over there. So I've been Fuego, y'all have been Rad Status, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, Cinemigos. Constant viewers and readers alike say thank you for some of your time today. Hopefully we share more of it sooner rather than later, and until then, stay home and watch more Mando, because this is the way. Let's get this kid some goddamn food, please. Seriously.